Right, I'll try and be perky for a change, shall I? A wee bit to camera. Welcome to First Minister's Questions of the 2nd of February 2012, and this time we can't say it's a historic week. Was it a historic week?
Well, it's historic because Phil's not here.
That's true. But it's not historic.
No, the brouhaha has died down.
I've got a funny feeling that the Unionists have had a better week.
Seems to. I mean, I was a bit surprised to see Salmon's popularity dropping in the Norrie poll.
13 points. It's a long way.
Yeah, it's a fairly major dip. So, from the Union's point of view, a good thing, but from the point of view of a positive campaign, a bad thing. Because if it's working, attacking Salmond, they'll keep doing it. And we won't get the adult debate that I would imagine the vast majority of people in the country want to hear.
Still 2.5 years to go.
Aye, but if that's the only success they have, they'll stick with it.
We can expect negative campaign.
Well, I've yet to see positive.
There is, they have no choice, the Unionists. We call it a scare story, but basically it is. It's making the electorate scared to make the choice for yes, and the SNP have got to build up the confidence of the electorate to make that yes vote. So that's where it all, it revolves around that. Well, how did you feel, generally speaking, what kind of a FMQs was it today?
I didn't like this screaming and shouting in the background.
Seems to be a lot of noise from the backbenchers.
And the SNP were as guilty, if not more guilty than anyone, which is inevitable, I suppose, with the numbers, but I think a bit of discipline's needed there. I think somebody needs to go and tell them to keep their mouth shut.
I think that's, to some extent, was what the presiding officer was, her interruptions. That was another point. She at least twice interrupted Johann Lamont and turned down Johann Lamont's mic. So we as an audience didn't actually hear what, quite a bit, little bits, but there could have been crucial bits that Johann Lamont said.
But, I mean, the discipline did go, and that's disappointing. I've never ever thought this schoolboy barracking should transfer from Westminster. I mean, in the days of the Labour Party's strength, it tended to happen. But it's been fairly civilised. And I do think somebody needs their backside kicked for it. It doesn't look like a grown-up parliament.
I thought both Johann Lamont and Ruth Davidson had their best performances so far since they became leaders.
I think, I mean, I can't remember whether it was the first time we did this or the second, but the battling Bochel, as I like to call Mrs. Lamont, certainly seems more comfortable when she's being a little more aggressive. And she seemed on surer footing, although she's gone over the same old stuff. I mean, I don't really want to hear Freds Goodwin's name again.
It's going to be brought up.
Accusing Salmond of writing him a letter of support when he was riding on the crest of the wave, and the Labour Party didn't see it coming. Why they expected anybody else to? Gordon Brown apparently had him in for 6 consultations at Downing Street.
As an economic advisor.
So, I mean, a letter against that, it's no big deal.
And it was Jack McConnell who proposed him to become Sir for a few
peerage. Yeah.
I'm surprised that the Labour Party went on that, given that it was quite clear that what Salmond would say back, and they brought that issue up.
It couldn't be avoided. I mean, it had to be mentioned. It was mentioned last week, and
What was their soundbite? The Freds Goodwin of Scottish politics.
Where she gets that from, I'm not sure. Perhaps she knows something we don't. But the attacking Salmond thing, I have worries about. questions about, because there's no denying that, you know, he's the captain of the ship,
Mm-hmm.
and if they find it successful to attack him, that's going to be a much easier road to take than a reasoned argument.
She started off, she picked really, apart from Freds Goodwin and the supposed support that she had from Salmond, which I don't think she came out too strong on. I think the currency union issue, I think, was her main focus of attack. I was curious where at some point in the
I was surprised that Salmond, he didn't seem particularly prepared on that one.
I'm not sure where the ground, how strong the ground is on that. But you know my feelings on that. It was interesting. At one point, the term currency union was replaced by monetary union, and was that Salmond or was that Lamont that came in for that? Because that's an interesting. There could be quite a difference.
Well, the other argument that didn't come up is the idea that the Bank of England, all for its name, is the Bank of Britain.
Well, that's my point. I think it's no. I'm surprised the SNB don't bring it up. It's part of a bigger picture, but there is always this kind of assumption that it's Scotland leaving, whereas at the point of separation, you have two successor states which, in law and in international perception, are equal in rights and responsibilities and assets.
So effectively, we should own 8% of the Bank of England.
We'll certainly have Scottish representation on the board, which at the moment I believe there's none.
Why would it be?
Why does do the SNP not mention that kind of issue that the two successor states? I don't know.
They might just feel that the line they're taking, where the big bad brother down south is an easier dog to kick than
I think
start
that is
talking about equality.
It's Tory government versus
So
the Scots.
strategy.
It means it's not against the SNP or the Scottish government. It becomes all Scots are being put down upon by a Tory government in London again, which is an easy argument to.
Yeah. The well, I mean, the Freds Goodwin one. I mean, he managed to get Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and Ed Balls.
I was going to say it's Ed Ball.
Gone, going, and still there.
Yes, I was expecting. I was expecting that Alistair Darling would be the third one there. So at the moment, given that Alistair Darling has been proposed as the leader of the Unionist,
And refused it.
well, he hasn't actually refused it. He's qualified.
I'm sure he was quoted in one of the papers saying he's got too hard a job being a Westminster MP.
But he's-
that.
Well, that sounds a bit iffy. But he's certainly not. He didn't get mentioned today. I have personally been engaged in a fair bit of banter on the internet on the basis that you've got Alistair Darling defending, saying it shouldn't just be Freds Goodwin and all these other people at fault. And I keep expecting, including me, I was the regulator. Well, he was assistant to Gordon Brown, wasn't he? Or was he not at the time?
Yes. But I think the Freds Goodwin one, it's quite funny. I mean, I never thought I'd said this, but to pick him out of the pack, what about the rest of the board of RBS?
I think.
I mean, it wasn't entirely his decision. It all had to be sanctioned by a board of directors.
Big no bones about it. I think Salmon did do really well when he talked about there was regulation light, but there was no regulation. What was it Gordon Brown is supposed to have said? No regulation at all.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to Mr. Salmond. Yes, light touch regulation, limited touch regulation, and then proposing no regulation.
Which effectively was what happened, isn't it?
It looks like it.
What did you think about Lamont's question to Salmond about naming 3 countries who were in currency stroke monetary unions who were successful? I mean, she came up with what was it?
Well, he came up with North Korea,
Oh, that was people that weren't in monetary unions, yeah, wasn't
Yes.
it? Iran,
Iran,
Congo,
North Korea,
and the Congo, yeah.
the Congo, yes.
But that surprised me. I expected Salmon to come straight back at her there. She wrong-footed him there. And I think that's why we feel she performed better, because he performed worse.
Okay, that's possible.
He didn't have the answer at his fingertips, which he normally does.
So I'm looking for the answer to my own question about the defence. Someone must have expected the currency union issue to come up, and I don't feel that his response was very strong. Neither do you, quite clearly.
No, I mean, as I say, I fully expected him to have some researcher's paper in front of him. Although he came back and said, you know, X number out of the 20 most successful
11 of the
economies
top 20
are in some form of currency
OECD
union.
are in. Now this is where it was Salmon that switched to monetary union rather than currency union, and he included the Swiss. I think they're just in a currency union with Liechtenstein.
And they're the England to Liechtenstein, Scotland, are they not? They're the main partner there, are they not?
Well, yes. But I think, and of course, then he came out, Salmon came out and then said, well, it's common to be in a currency union, monetary union, and still be independent. And he stressed what he describes as independence, and that is control of your resources, all of your resources. But of course, it begs the question.
He also managed to get in the 7.5 billion surplus had we been independent over the last 5 years.
Could do quite a lot with that, £7.5 million, billion pounds.
So,
That's true.
which, you know, that's no doubt can be cut to ribbons by economist A, while economist B argues in favour.
So Joanne Lemon has summed up by saying really that, as usual, that Alex Salmon hadn't answered, and to some extent that's true, but I don't think on today's questions. I think he did answer her questions. I think when he got to Ruth Davidson, it's a different story. But she said that I think in a currency union, Scotland would have no influence, and therefore Alex Salmon is unable to make a case for independence.
Yeah, and then he got up and restated the fact that no politician is supposed to have any influence over the decisions anyway.
Well, he said that Gordon Brown gave away the rights for the government in Westminster to have hands-on control of the Bank of England. I forget the actual language he used. What is the terminology? You know, presumably the Bank of England can still be. At the end of the day, the buck stops with the government, the Prime Minister. He's all powerful under the.
Well, the argument, both by the Tories for the independent production of figures and by Brown for the independent production of an inflation rate, which is really what we're talking about, was that they couldn't fiddle the figures, but transparency and honesty. And would we doubt that they don't absolutely crave transparency and honesty?
But there is, we've been through all the Thatcher years when it was monetarism. I'm not going to go down that road today. The Chicago School and all that, and the control of the money supply. Was it M3 or M1? And I said, well, let's not go down there today. I'm not up to speed on that. But it was crucial as far as the monetarists were concerned, and I believe that is still current thinking in the present government anyway. Well, look, let's move to Ruth Davidson, can we? She came in with her strong suit that she felt was I was talking about defence and jobs.
Yeah.
Crucially. And I was going to look for one of the quotes. It was rather a good one about jobs.
Well, she quoted that there was 6,500 jobs at Fastlane, the single largest employer in Scotland.
Yes.
And would those jobs go when the nuclear subs went? Because the SNP had been using the removal of nuclear weapons as a reason for independence. Salmon simply came back and said, no, I mean, the jobs will stay, which I didn't think he was forceful enough on. I think he should have been a lot more positive about that. You know, there would have to be a Navy base in Scotland. There are other pieces of equipment there, minesweepers, normal submarines, etc. And then moved on to his, you know, we're not firing anybody line.
Oh, well, yeah, that's
Actually,
true.
no, that came in later.
Yeah, now I like the line here, somebody here on the Twitter. Tory leader Ruth Davidson says nuclear weapons are a price worth paying for jobs.
It's not actually what she said,
But
but,
that was somebody-
it could be construed as that.
Yeah, well, that's someone else's interpretation, should we say.
But she stuck with it. I mean, she then moved on to her letter from, didn't sound like a squaddy that I know anyway.
But you can always find one
Well,
letter from one constituent to make your point if you're a politician.
well, I actually think the biggest outcome of that particular,
Well, what was the letter? Let's summarise. The letter was saying, I'm a proud Scotsman serving in the British Army. Will I have to choose between the British Army and the Scottish Defence Force?
but as Sam said, and I mean, I thought everybody understood, there are, what,
23 nationalities presently in the British Army.
including Fijians, Australians, Americans,
Oh, goodness and mercy.
and of course the Gurkhas,
Of course, yes.
if they are all going to get paid off. Which reminds me about the brouhaha that was going on behind while she was asking her question.
Now, what was that about?
Some MSP shouted if he's still got a job when she mentioned that he was about to be deployed to Afghanistan.
Right.
Now, that's probably going to be a headline. Whoever that MSP was, and I would imagine he'll be an SNP MSP, will be found out and be expected to apologise.
I'm not quite sure I get the reason for the apology.
Well, it'll be span that it was disrespectful. Sorry, spun.
I thought you nearly went to span there.
It'll be spun as being disrespectful to a member of the armed forces, and that's why the discipline on the backbenches
Right.
is important.
I think, I mean, it's a fair enough point to make, and I think Salmon made it himself, of course, which was that right now the British government is sacking serving servicemen, and some of them even get to hear about it when they're out on the front line. And it's
Ridiculous.
It is all a bit
Outrageous.
odd. I find defence, when I was young, I was, well, what was the Marxist education? I had problems with army and defence, but I quickly came to the point of the French Communist Party. I still kind of think there should be there that your forces, you do need professional forces, but they should also have a fairly large conscripted membership as well, because then the army represents the people, whereas at the moment it's a volunteer army. It sounds great when you put it in a volunteer army, but that means they're a self-selecting elite.
So essentially what you're arguing for is trained forces for the revolution.
I don't know, perhaps I didn't make that argument very well. They went on to discover some details about contracts for building ships.
That was,
Salmon suggested that
yeah, because of the EU regulations,
they have to put tenders out.
the British government, which seems to be the only government that can't circumvent these regulations,
They've already
Would have
shortlisted
to-
3 foreign companies to build some
Two
important
in
new
South
ships for
Korea.
the Navy.
2 in South Korea and 1 in Italy. But we seem to be the only country, i.e. Britain seems to be the only country that sticks to these regulations or doesn't have the malum to find a way around them.
I thought she made a mistake when she, with Davison, started lining up the critics of SNP policy or independence on defence. George Robertson. For some reason or other, he doesn't have the respect that
He believes he has.
he believes he has.
Yeah.
as former Director General or whatever it was of NATO,